Hi, this is Jacqueline with New Moon Oracle. And I wanted to talk about the 5 symptoms or signs that I recognized in my life that were happening to me because I was in an abusive relationship. I didn't know that they were signs at the time, but in retrospect, I can look back and see that they were. And I wanted to share them with you just in case this is something that you're going through. One of the signs was self-doubt. Before I was married to my abuser, I was working 2 jobs. I was paying the bills. I was, helping the kids with school. I was making decisions all on my own and I was doing just fine. Even if I made mistakes, I self-corrected and things went on. But when I was in my relationship, everything I did was criticized. Any decision that I make was questioned. And while I was making the decision, I wasn't given any support or recommendations. I would try to talk to my husband about, this, I went to this job interview and what do you think about this job? Or I think I'm going to go to this class and learn this or that. Or I think I'm going to volunteer at the church or whatever. And he never had any input until I made the decision. And then when I made the decision, it was criticized. And so I found myself feeling very full of self-doubt. When I would go to make a decision, I would almost play in my head that it's not going to work out because things never did. And the reasons they never did was because the abusive person in my life was telling me they weren't the right decision, or they weren't going to work out, and that I made a bad choice. So when that happens, it's this little play that happens in your head and it starts to make you doubt yourself, and you get to the point where you don't even trust your decisions. As a matter of fact, after I left my abuser, I felt very lost. Like I felt like I needed to ask other people what I should be doing. I did not have any self-worth or I didn't feel like I could make decisions on my own. The other thing that I noticed was that communication was almost absent completely. When we first started dating, my ex was not a big talker, but we did talk, and we talked about things that were difficult, like miscarriages that I had or past relationships. And that communication was really open and great in the beginning. But then as the relationship went on, the communication got less and less. And every time there was communication, it was more or less telling me what he wanted to hear or didn't want to hear. And for example, I can give you an example about blueberries. My stepson, who was just little, was taking a package of fruit out of the fridge, like blueberries, and he would eat a few, and then he would leave the package on the front steps and go about his playing. Normal kid situation. And I would try to remind him that, hey, please remember to eat your berries and then put them back, and we can't waste them. They're $5 a package, and try to teach and instruct our son. But what would happen would be I would be told that I'm just trying to be mean, that I'm picking on his child, that I'm hurting the child's feelings, and that I'm being unnecessarily picky about things. Or, for example, if the children didn't take off their shoes and ran through the house, I would say, hey guys, do you want to mop the floor? Because I'm the one that has to mop the floor. Get back there and take your shoes off. And I was the bad guy. So it got to the point where communication became like a dictatorship, where I was only being told my faults and everything that I was doing was wrong. And so communication was no longer an open dialogue between two people. It was more or less a prison guard and an inmate. Another thing that I noticed happened to me was helplessness. And that kind of goes with the self-doubt, but helplessness started to dive in because I was wanting to leave the relationship, and I was starting to feel like I couldn't do it on my own. That strong person that I was, independent, raising kids on my own, putting myself through school, all of a sudden, I forgot my power. All of a sudden, I was thinking, how can I do this on my own? I don't have enough money. And for me, it was compounded by the fact that my physical body was becoming very ill. I developed rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. I had a cervical neck issue. I was full of anxiety and depression. And so I started to doubt myself because my health was declining. I was aging. I didn't have any money. And so the environment created this sense in me that I was not powerful, I was not capable, and that no one would help me, and that certainly wouldn't get help from him, and that no one would believe me. And that was what was kind of programmed into me. And that's definitely a sign if you're going through that and you feel like if you wanted to be independent, there's no way that you could, that you have to rely on other people. That's a sure sign that somebody is convincing you of that. The fourth thing was anxiety. I've never been a person to have anxiety. I've always rolled with the flow, rolled with the punches. I've been through a lot in my life, and I never really worried about things. I always knew, hey, I got it covered. I'll take care of it. And it's not a big deal. But when I started to get a lot of anxiety was when I started to realize I couldn't do it by myself. And some of those other symptoms were bringing on the anxiety. For example, when you believe that you're in an abusive relationship and now you're stuck in it, you start to get very anxious about, how am I going to live like this? If I'm stuck, how am I going to tolerate this for the rest of my life? And you realize that you can't, but you also think, I can't get out. And that causes a lot of anxiety. Also, the anxiety of every day, not knowing what was going to happen. Was I going to be yelled at today? Was I going to be ghosted today? Was I going to be told that I don't know what I'm doing? Were family members going to start siding with him? And was I going to be the lonely man out? And that caused a lot of anxiety and stress in my life. And then lastly, it was second guessing everything. I would say something, he would react, and then I would second guess whether that was a normal reaction or not. And what made it really difficult for me was I wasn't able to share with people what was happening because they didn't see the story behind it. One example would be that my house was in the country. And my ex-husband, unbeknownst to me, was putting garbage in this kind of lean-to we had that went to the basement from outside. So you went to our basement from the outside. You didn't go to the basement from in the house. And instead of bringing the garbage, we used to have to drive it to the waste receptacle in town once a week. But instead of doing that, he was sticking it in this lean-to that went into our basement. So we got rats. And it was horrible. We could hear them running through the roof. We could hear them in the walls. And this is no mice. We could hear like boom, 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 like rats. And I was like, we need to get rid of rats. I'm going to call an exterminator. I can't live like this. No, you can't call an exterminator. We don't have the money for that. So he was going to take care of it himself. And he did. He put poison out and the rats ate it. And then they died in the walls, and we had horrific, horrible smelling house because rats were dying in the walls and in the attic. And I wanted to call an exterminator so that we didn't have that issue. So not only did my ex be lazy and cause our whole family a very disgusting problem that was stinky, smelly, and not safe for children, but then was telling me that I was being ridiculous, that that's what happens in the country. And when I would tell people what happened, they would just not see the significance of it because it was an isolated incident to them. So in their eyes, it was like, oh, he must not have thought of the fact that putting garbage in there would have attracted rats. I also had a problem with, he was a hoarder. And so he would hoard things in the house and keep piling things in the house. And I would try to remove them. And when I would remove them, I would be told that I was stealing his things, that I wasn't respecting his things. But he would literally go to flea markets every weekend and bring home truckloads. And I mean truckloads. Our yard looked like it looked like Sanford and Sons, if you remember that show. It was embarrassing. But my point to all that was I started second guessing whether my reaction to these things were normal or were they being exaggerated. Once I left the environment and walked away, I can't even believe I lived in that house anymore. The way that he had destroyed it, we were repairing it. It was an old farmhouse that we were remodeling, and he just quit remodeling it. We literally had, in the Midwest, a tarp over the side of the house, and that was all that was in between the side of the house and a closet and then bedrooms. So we were living in a house that had horrible drafts, was cold, and he would go all over town fixing everyone else's pipes and, helping this guy and moving a truck for this guy, but never took care of anything at our house. And when I would mention that, hey, maybe we should fix the house, or there were times that I actually hired somebody to finish a project because I couldn't live with it anymore. And when I would do that, then I would get criticized by everyone in the family. Like, why are you spending money? Why isn't he finishing it? Well, he won't finish it. And so it just really messes with your mind and causes a lot of second guessing. One other thing I wanted to say to you is that if any of this rings true to you, a lot of people are not going to understand what you're going through unless they've been through this type of abuse. And nobody means to not understand, right? One time I told a story about this old house that we lived in was just prone to spiders and things. We were in the country, and there was several times that dirty dishes would attract ants and things. And so I would ask everyone to please not leave dirty dishes in the sink. And just by my requesting that was his reason to do it more. So it's almost like you start second guessing what I should say and what I shouldn't say, because what am I going to say that's going to cause or give him the ammunition to torture me more? And it sounds silly to say. And like I said, when I told people that he would deliberately put dirty dishes in the sink and not rinse them and not put them in the dishwasher, that sounds like a wife who's just being a nag and picky and wanting everything to perfection, but that wasn't it. And so when I would share these stories with people, they thought I was just being kind of ridiculous because they didn't see and understand the extent. And another reason they didn't see the extent of it was because I wasn't able to verbalize that to people. And another thing that I wanted to mention too was that when someone is in a narcissistic abusive relationship, it takes time to know when you're ready to leave. It takes an incredible amount of strength to leave emotionally, because the worst is happening to you. And when you leave that narcissist, they are going to do the worst things that they can think of to you. And so that is part of the anxiety. That is part of the second guessing. That is part of all of these symptoms that I talk about. You go through these stages of second guessing yourself and being anxious and wondering if you can do this and if it's better to just stay and try to make it work. And when you finally come to the realization that you need to leave, that's when it's really important for people to be supportive. I did have a few people in my life that did sort of recognize that this wasn't healthy. And they just sort of said to me, well, why the hell are you staying then? And it was like, if I could pick up tomorrow and leave, I would. But, people just don't get that. So my point today is to let you know some of the signs and symptoms that I recognized after the fact. Some of them I recognized during. And if you have any of these sort of things going on in your life, they could be symptoms that somebody is really abusing you and manipulating you for their own reasons. When you're in it and it happens every day, you become numb to it in a way. You try to live with it, and they're very good at manipulating you and convincing you that it's you. I hope this video helped you. I hope that if this is happening to you, that you can recognize it, and perhaps there's someone that you can talk to, a counselor. Join my channel, subscribe. Like the video. I'm trying to build a community here where we can help each other. There's a lot of this in the world today. And there's always been this in the world, but we are in a time that we need to realize that we all have our own discernment. God put us on this earth with our own light, and we weren't here to be the responsibility of other people's unmet emotions, unhealed wounds. And I just wanted to thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you. I hope that sharing it is something that will encourage you to heal and get out of whatever isn't good for you. I love you, and you need to love you too. Take care.